Good evening. Welcome to Kopernik Observatory. My name is Drew Desker, and I just have a bad cold. So that's all it is, and so that's why I'm otherwise masked. So it's great to have you all here this evening. Really, I also want to welcome those watching on the live stream. Let's see here. So I always start with the following. So who's here for the first time? Oh, a couple of people. All right. Who here are members? All right. Good portion of the rest. All right. Kopernik Observatory, we're a nonprofit organization. We belong to what's called the ASTC, the Association of Science and Technology Centers. And our Kopernik membership gets you into 380 other science centers. So if you like this kind of place, it's something worth investing in. But we just finished sort of celebrating our 50th anniversary of being a public observatory and informal STEM education facility. We had a pretty major gala last year with a Nobel Prize-winning chemist as our keynote speaker. And now we are looking toward the next 50 years. And we'll be announcing a fairly major effort to expand our facility, and so keep tuned for that. But just for those that are sort of new to Kopernik, tell you just a little bit about ourselves. Again, we're open every Friday night from March to mid-December, which we always do a public program of some sort, and then hopefully afterwards, if it's clear, we open up our scopes and invite you to look through the scopes. But beyond that, we do a lot of educational outreach. Today we had a number of third graders in here learning about magnetics. They were doing some playground physics, and so we do again a fairly extensive school outreach program. But we also do a lot of summer camps. So we're actually in the process of doing registering students for which now will be our 33rd year of STEM-themed summer camps. These are day camps from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., starting as young as students who are just going into second grade up through high school. Some of the camps we're offering is, it's called CAD Ventures, where students will learn how to use computer-aided design to make 3D devices, and we'll print them on through our 3D printers. We've got a virtual reality camp where students will learn and create their own virtual reality environment using our virtual reality headsets. We've got, again, some introductory courses or camps for the younger students. I run a camp called Return to the Edge of Space, where these students will build a payload that will go onto a weather balloon. The weather balloon we launched from here goes up to over 100,000 feet, which then finally bursts, and then most of the time gently returns to Earth. And I indicate most of the time. The last balloon flight that we had, just as the balloon burst, it managed to disconnect the parachute from the payload. So I think we calculated the payload hitting the ground at about 80 miles an hour. Fortunately, it wasn't in the middle of a field, and no one was hurt, and all the equipment was still running. And this year, we're actually going to be we'll be flying a Geiger counter to get a sense of what kind of cosmic radiation you get at different elevations. So if any of you out there or on the live stream are interested in a summer camp for a child or a grandchild, go to our website. You can check that out. Also coming up is our Rocket Fest. This is something we do. I think it's our 16th year, where families will build an Estes rocket, and then we'll come up during a certain launch window that they sign up for. We'll check out the rocket, make sure that it's ready to go. We'll put the engine in, and then you go outside and launch it. So we are probably about 2/3 full already with our launch windows, and but there's still room. And whether you're a newcomer or an advanced builder, we've got something for you. One of the things that I really enjoy about being up here are these Friday night programs. It's an opportunity for us to learn something perhaps that we've never thought about, or expand knowledge we already do have. We're very fortunate to have access to a number of universities, but also a number of individuals that have got subject matter expertise. And so it's a great opportunity for you to learn more about something. Not everything we do up here is always talking about astronomy, evidenced by this evening's presentation. And then afterwards, we're hoping, seeing some sky clearing, and we're hoping that will continue, so that afterwards we can have you come out, take a look through our scopes. There will actually be a pass of the International Space Station about 9:40 tonight. So if you haven't seen the International Space Station fly by, hopefully those clouds will keep give us that opportunity to do so. Well, as I said, we not everything we do is always about astronomy, and tonight's program is evidence of that. And I was just in a discussion with our speaker about another topic, and she told me what she had done for many years. I was like, oh, that's got to be a Friday night program. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Johannah Berry, the President Emeritus of the Galapagos Conservancy. Thank you. I keep calling it conservatory, but it's all right. So, yep.
Okay, so I'm going to turn this on.
And just a second. Go ahead and talk.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep, we're good. We're good. So can I walk around? Is that okay? Is that going to be problematic for the people who are?
No, I mean the camera will follow you up here, but if you walk that way, we'll
okay.
We'll make arrangements.
Okay, let me get this on here. You know what? I'm going to hold it in my hand. So, hello, I'm Johannah. I want to do a couple of things tonight, and I'm announcing it as though you could raise your hand and say, no, don't do that. But one of the things I want to do is talk about Galapagos in terms of conservation. I want to talk to you about why this place is meaningful for you folks and your backyards. Because otherwise it's just, look at this amazing place 600 miles off the coast of Ecuador, isn't this interesting? But it really does have lessons for what you're planting in your yard, etc. The other thing I'm going to do, because I think this is interesting for folks, is, how do you get there? Where is it? How much does it cost to go? These sorts of, obvious questions. And then last but not least, is I'm not going to talk about myself. I'm going to wait till the last slide to even introduce myself. So this is your opportunity to leave before I start to talk about myself. And then you can go, well, that was a really interesting presentation, but we don't particularly care who she is. But let's just say that I do have some experience here in Galapagos. So you can't talk about Galapagos Islands without talking about evolution. You also can't talk about the Galapagos without talking about Charles Darwin. You may know that he only spent 6 weeks in the islands, and you may or may not have known that. So it was not a huge highlight of his career, and in fact, he didn't know actually what he had. He had collected all these, people talk about Darwin finches. He had collected, in fact, mockingbirds, and brought them back to his joint in the UK. And it was only in consultation with other scientists that he went, oh, I've just noticed, I don't think this is exactly what he said, but it's pretty much what he said. Oh, I've just noticed that there are these different variations in these mockingbirds, hence the beginning of On the Origin of Species by Natural Selection, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, you're going to give me a hand if I do this wrong. Do I hit this thing here? Yep. Okay. Ha! There you go. Okay, so this is the travelogue part of this presentation, right? So the Galapagos Islands are 600 miles off the coast of Ecuador. Again, province of Ecuador. We had that earlier conversation about how someone thought it belonged to Peru, and boy, oh, I'll tell you a story about Peru. Let me do this. Martha Stewart, you all know who Martha Stewart is, right? She called my office and said, I have create, I don't know if it wasn't she, but it was her aide de camp, called the office and said, I have just created these Galapagos themed beach towels because I have just been to the Galapagos. So, I mean, Martha Stewart, hello, you know, this is a great opportunity. So she said, would you come up north, which I've lived in Virginia at this point, you know, come up to to her office and work on what they call a hang tag, which is the thing that, you know, you attach and it says, these towels were made from blah, blah, and this is the story of Galapagos. So I said, oh, sure, absolutely, you know, this is great. Got on her private jet. I'm bragging, but it's true, I did. Went up, only to discover that the towels were made in Peru. Now, Peru and Ecuador have a dodgy history. And I said, you know, she wanted to put them on all the cruise ships. And I said, well, this could be problematic, you know. Is there any way you could have the towels made someplace else? No, anyway, she sold them at Kmart. I don't know if they ever went anywhere, but so anyway, there you go, about Peru and Ecuador. So the discovery by Tomás de Berlanga is basically he was a priest who got becalmed, or I don't know, I'm not a sailor, but his boat drifted. He hit the islands, called them the Las Islas Encantadas, the Enchanted Islands. The other thing is, just again, this is the travelogue part. There are 13 main islands, 4 are inhabited. There are probably now about 30,000 residents in Galapagos. When I started my job, there were 12,000, and so it continues to move forward. Let's see. Beep. Oh, the point of this map again is to show you the main islands. The islands to the east, like San Cristobal, you know, and the islands to the west. Are, you know, there's a difference. The oldest islands are about 3 million years old. The youngest islands are about 750,000 years old. Also, Fernandina, for instance, is still an active volcano. There are still active volcanoes on Isabela, just so you know that. Most islands have a subspecies of tortoises, and if you want to really start an argument, and I suggest you don't do this, get a group of herpetologists and a group of geneticists together in one room and start to talk about the difference between species and subspecies. It does not end well, I'm telling you. It really does not end well. So, how do you get there? Well, you know, you can get on a plane, and it takes 2 days. I should mention this, we mentioned this earlier, because you cannot fly directly to Galapagos. You have to go to Miami or Houston or wherever you're going, and then go to Quito or Guayaquil, and then you have to stay overnight and then take another plane out. So can I fly directly to the islands? No. There's no possibility of doing that because there's some significant quarantine issues, which we appreciate, obviously. Now, can I sail my own boat to the islands? Well, yes, you can. If you happen to have a very large boat that can, you know, crew a bunch of people, yeah. I mean, there are plenty of people who have flown, I mean, who've taken their own boats to the Galapagos. Okay. It's a great picture. I can say these things about that's a great picture because I have taken none of these pictures. I am someone who worked in Galapagos for 30 years, never taken a picture because I'm hopeless and I leave the lens cap on when people still had lens caps on their cameras. And I can get a camera strap in a picture even if your camera doesn't have a strap because I'm just hopeless. So these are people who are a lot better than I am taking these pictures. So it's important to know that 97% of the land area is national park. And the Galapagos Marine Reserve, I believe now, is the second largest marine reserve in the world. The first is the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. So there's obviously a huge effort on quarantine and introduced species control. And then there's the management of the islands and the folks who live there. So I'm throwing this in too because the role of the nonprofit community is huge in Galapagos. My own organization, Galapagos Conservancy, is in there, but the Charles Darwin Foundation, founded in 1959, is probably the oldest organization working in the islands. It is a research station, and these other organizations, you probably recognize a lot of the names. Galapagos Conservation Trust is our sister organization in the UK. Okay, well, it's a great picture of a marine iguana. So the point of this slide, and actually Galapagos was one of the first, as I say, one of the first places to be inscribed on the World Heritage Site list. The difference between endemism and biodiversity is important to know. I mean, it's not critical, you know, but it's a useful piece of information. And that is that Galapagos has a high rate of endemism, meaning species that are found nowhere else on Earth. It does not have a high rate of biodiversity. If you want biodiversity, for instance, go to continental Ecuador that has thousands of species of birds, insects, etc. Galapagos does not have that. But what's unusual about Galapagos is that there are animals found in Galapagos that are found nowhere else on Earth. So there's you can read as well as I can, so you can see. And incidentally, the pink iguanas, this is not a joke. When the iguanas were discovered, and I was still working in Galapagos at that time, the scientists thought that it was simply an iguana that had gotten caught in a volcano. Seriously, that it had been burned. And it turns out it is a completely different species. And they're pink, but not adorable pink. They're sort of pink and black, and they do look like they've been roasted. I mean, sorry, but that, you know. I can say this because I'm not a scientist. That's the other thing I should say. Even though I said I'm not going to talk about myself, I'm not a scientist. And I'm very proud of saying I'm not a scientist. I'm a liberal arts major, and that's, yay, liberal arts. That's all I want to say about liberal arts. So the Galapagos was one of the first places that really took an active interest in how people approach the islands. So the travel modality, this live-aboard cruise, was one of the first places that ever did this kind of stuff. Island hopping refers to, incidentally, and there are a lot of ways you can go to the Galapagos, taking small boats and going from one inhabited island to the other. It's cheaper to do island hopping, but you don't see as much because you only have these 3 islands you can go to. I'll tell you a story about strict regulations about group sizes. Years ago, there were Cunard lines, I can say their names now, I don't think it's a big issue, wanted to add the Galapagos Islands to their round-the-world cruise. Now these people sitting on these boats have paid a significant amount of money to go around the world. So they added the Galapagos arm, much against the conservation community, much against many folks in the Galapagos Islands, because he said, what are we going to do with these thousands of people coming off these boats? Well, what happened was the islands, the draw, I guess is what you call it, was too shallow. So these very large cruise boats, I mean, think, you know, Celebrity, think the big 3,000 passenger guys, couldn't come close to the island. So they parked out in deep water. Then they hired a bunch of 40 passenger boats to take the folks off the big boats onto the smaller boats. Then from the smaller boats that got closer to the islands, they put folks in what they called in Galapagos pangas or zodiacs to actually land on the islands. Well, about the second day in, these people who had paid thousands of dollars for this wilderness experience said, wait a minute, I'm standing on this beach with 400 other people. And even though the conservation community was saying, this is a terrible idea, nobody listened, but when the folks who had paid thousands of dollars said, this is ridiculous, problem solved. Seriously, problem solved. The Cunard lines pulled the whole thing out, and that was great. So anyway, you can read as well as I can about pretty pictures, because I thought I'd throw them in there. Again, I didn't take any of them. Sally Lightfoot crab, obviously, whales, spotted eagle rays, flightless cormorant.
Got out of the presentation mode here.
Oh.
See if I can get you back in here.
Oh, here we go. Thank you. Flightless cormorant, again, endemic. Frigate bird, one of the many finch species. The joke, Peter Grant is a very famous finch expert, and the joke was that only God and Peter Grant can tell the difference between these finches, because I think there are 12 or 13 species of finch. And here's something you can bring up at your next cocktail party. You can say, I happen to know the difference between a magnificent frigate bird and a great frigate bird. And the person standing next to you will say, how fascinating, and will probably try to edge their way away from you. But the only way I know this, and I am no ornithologist, is a great frigate bird has a green sheen on its wings. See? Great green. Even I can do that. Magnificent has a purple sheen. So again, I give this to you for free. You can use it as you see fit. Yes. Yes. A tortoise. And this is a domed tortoise. There are two main species. Well, I hope there's not a geneticist in the room. Domed tortoises versus saddleback tortoises. Again. So even though I don't particularly like the word rewilding, because it's been used, sort of overused in conservation, like bringing back the giant, the woolly mammoth, bringing back the dodo. I don't know. Galapagos has not had that level of extinction such that you would call it rewilding. But this is a part where we began to talk about why Galapagos is useful in your backyard. And one of them is invasive species. I mean, invasive plants, invasive insects, invasive mammals. And these are all in everybody's backyards, and this is an important piece of why Galapagos has some lessons for all of us. Isabella, this is where you come in. This is where you come in about the tigers and the eradication, okay? So the Isabella project was, as I said, the largest ecosystem restoration project in a national park. What this was a project to get rid of, to eradicate introduced goats. And you would be surprised how difficult that is, because what started off as about, in the early 70s, they thought they were about 4,000, became 150,000 goats. So how do you get rid of them? Well, I was part of a workshop where we had park managers from Australia, from New Zealand, now those are countries that know their way around invasive species, from the US, and from Ecuador. And it was a long conversation. It took about a week and a half to figure out, can we control the goats or can we eradicate the goats? And the decision was to eradicate. So this is where you get helicopters. This is where you get trained folk. And this is where you learn the difference between keeping the population stable and really getting rid of them. So the really getting rid of them involved a technique called Judas goats. Does anybody know what a Judas goat is? But you can probably figure it out, right? If you know your Bible. Actually, it should have been called Jezebel goats, because what you do is you grab the goats are social obligates, and you grab the ladies you sterilize them, you put a big collar around their neck, a radio collar, and the gents come and visit, and when they come and visit, you shoot them all. And you shoot everybody except the gal with the necklace. Now, I know this sounds odd, but I actually, in order for me to raise money, to go to individual donors and say, hi, I know you care about conservation, but could I have $100,000 to kill a bunch of animals? You know, that's sort of a non-starter, you know, in terms of like meeting a donor. So I went up in the helicopters with these hunters and watched how they did it. And, you know, it's not pleasant, but that's what you had to do. And it was, not only did this project come in under budget, but also far beyond, you know, what anybody thought it was going to take. Tiger. So, one of the things that people do, because they got nothing else to do, is decide to give you advice about how to do this. And I had nothing to say because I've never handled a rifle. I don't know what they're talking about. But the project leader, a woman named Linda Cayo, was walking down the street in Puerto Vallarta, and some people came up and said, we've got an idea. We know how to do this. Actually, one of the Australians said, just give me I remember this exactly. He said, just give me a bucket of bullets and a rifle. And she's going, yeah, that'll work. They said, why don't you introduce 2 female tigers? He said, really? How's that going to work? Well, you know, they're female, they're not going to reproduce, and then they'll eat all the goats. And you're going, yeah, we'll just mark that one down in terms of what a terrible idea this is. Española, I mean, Galapagos has been in the news lately. I don't know if you remember that the Philadelphia Zoo had just recently had four hatchlings from a western Santa Cruz tortoise, which was kind of fun. I don't know if you listened to NPR, but the story was the story of Española, which is an island back in the 70s where 14 tortoises were found distributed among the island, all over the island. 12 ladies, 2 gents. The idea was to bring them into captivity because there was no way that the gents and the ladies were going to find each other. So the idea was bring them all in. And that was fine, except then there's an issue if you've only got the 2 gents and the other ladies. Is there a bottleneck in terms of, you know, right, in terms of, what am I trying to say? So they decided to bring in another fella from the San Diego Zoo, hence the name Diego. And he proved to be quite enthusiastic, and was very enthusiastic, in fact. And the population now has, the population is well over 1,000 tortoises now reproducing and now reintroduced to Española. So that is a great story. Fernandina is even a better story, because in 1906, the California Academy of Sciences had an expedition to Galapagos, and one of their scientists, a fellow named Rollo Beck, found a tortoise on Fernandina. It was called Fantasticus because they didn't think anybody actually, there was a tortoise on Fernandina, but there was. It was the single male, solitary male tortoise, and killed it, skinned it, and brought it back to the California Academy of Sciences. Now, if there are scientists in this room, I think everybody agrees that what people thought was a good idea around the turn of the century isn't necessarily a good idea now. So that was 1906. No one thought a tortoise would be on Fernandina. Well, by golly, in 2019, on an expedition, they found a single female tortoise. So she was 119, and there she was. And she was little gal, well, little for a Galapagos tortoise, right? So Galapagos tortoises can be up to 600 pounds. This lady was about 150, slightly dehydrated, but there she was. She had lived on that island all by herself for well over 100 years. Now they're still looking to see if somewhere there could be another tortoise. Probably not. But you know, there she was, and doing pretty well for herself. Florian and Santa Cruz are also where there were very small populations of tortoises, and then they have successfully reproduced. Okay, this is you don't have to memorize this slide, but basically it's where all the various. I'm not going to do like a quiz at the end. And does everybody remember who lived on Fernandina? See, it's fantasticus because they didn't believe that anybody actually tortoises were there. So these are where various tortoises are distributed in the islands. Oh, so there have been some pretty important stories about what has been achieved. The cottony cushion scale, it's a small little mite that was destroying all kinds of vegetation, and they ended up introducing a ladybug that ended up eating all the cottony cushion scales. Now, I hope nobody asks me, I'm just going to tell you right now, don't ask me, well, once it ate up all the cottony cushion scale, what happened to the ladybugs? Because I actually don't know the answer to that. But the giant African land snail is a great story. That's, I think, yep, there you go. A great story, because they're big. They're about this big. Can anyone guess why someone brought giant land snails to Galapagos? That's actually good, but it's not the answer. It's even worse than that. Snail slime is used in ladies' cosmetics as a skin softener. So this enterprising group decided, well, that's a good idea. Why don't we just bring all these snails over and we can make these cosmetics? Well, it didn't really work out terribly well. So the other idea was, well, it's not working, so let's just release them. The same reason you don't release, you know, alligators in your toilet or, you know, goldfish in your ponds, you know. And they decided that was a great idea. So how do you get rid of these snails? Because snails do a great job of reproducing. Neville and Darwin, two dogs that I had the pleasure of bringing to Galapagos. It was a long story about going through the Ecuadorian embassy in DC, but they were snail sniffing dogs, and that's what their job was. Because otherwise, apparently, in order to get snails, it's a nighttime activity. You got to have a bucket, you got to have a headlight, and you got to run around in the foliage. These guys were terrific. They could point out all the snails, and that was the end of the snails. But I didn't know there was such a thing as a, you know, snail dog. But, you know, that's, you know, I told you I'm an English major. I don't know about snail dogs. So the story of Lonesome George, he's probably one of the most famous tortoises in the world. He was discovered, again, like the Fernandina tortoise, he was discovered, you know, living alone on the island of Pinta. He was named after George Goebel, Lonesome George. See? There's a certain age group that gets that joke. A bunch of like, who the hell was, you know? Yeah. So they were trying to breed him. They were trying to breed him with really, you know, they couldn't find another Pinta Island tortoise, so they thought, well, we'll get somebody, you know, close to Pinta and then sort of crossbreed him like they did with, say, the dusky seaside sparrow. I was in Galapagos when he died, and I will tell you that it was like losing, it was even bigger than losing, you know, a rock star. I mean, people were devastated. They walked around Galapagos, Puerto Ayora, with black armbands. There were signs in the cafes that said, "We have witnessed extinction," which is true. They had witnessed extinction. So they couldn't figure out why George didn't reproduce. So without going into a rather saucy story, I will say this, that they thought at one point he didn't reproduce because he didn't know what to do, because he had lived by himself for many, many years. So they brought in a couple of male tortoises from other species to say, and that's how it's done. That's all I'm going to say about that. That's how it's done. And no, it wasn't. He didn't catch on. It was not working. And his necropsy, which is, as you probably know, an autopsy on an animal. Yep, exactly. Discovered that his physiology did not allow any reproduction. So it wasn't that he didn't know, it was that he couldn't if he wanted to, which is unfortunate, but there you go. So yes, when he died, there were a group of us who were in Galapagos at the time who brought him back to the States in a cooler, no joke, in a cooler, wrapped with insulation, and got him up to the American Museum of Natural History, where he was preserved. So the new generation, yeah, obviously this is important. Lots of young people, remarkably, and this is probably true in everybody's backyard here, they don't know where they live. They don't understand the importance of where Galapagos is, and you know, a lot of kids in Galapagos, for instance, don't know how to swim. And you'd think if you lived on an island, you'd know how to swim. Well, not really. So there are lots and lots of efforts, and these are very important efforts to get young kids to be the next generation of ambassadors. So I've said this now about 3 million times. Galapagos in our own backyard. These are all things that you can do here, wherever you live. And these are the lessons really from Galapagos. Oh, this is your cue, because this is now going to talk about me. So if you want to make an excuse like, hey, it's been really swell listening to her, but so this is me. And this is how tortoises at the research station are raised. Remarkably, it's like Tupperware bins with vermiculite. In go the eggs, and they are stuck in these cabinets with 2 handheld hair dryers. This is no joke. This is exactly how it's done. 2 handheld hair dryers. And after a while, these, you know, fellows who end up, as I say, being 600 pounds, come out about this big. And then there is a process where they are kept in different sorts of cages. In the beginning, they just hang around and look like that and eat lettuce and hang out. Then when they get to be a little older, 2 or 3 years old, so they're about the size of, I guess, like a box turtle, they're put in cages with rocks. And the point of that is to teach tortoises how to right themselves once they fall over, which they will. So they learn how to climb on rocks, fall over, get back up, and then when they're about this big, which is considered, and this is a terrible phrase, but it's true, considered rat-proof, because rats are particularly awful when it comes to tortoises. When they're rat-proof, then they are released back into the wild. So by this time, they're about 5, 6 years old. And then, as I said, they live 150, 160, 180 years. Oh, so the other thing about me is that I created the organization Galapagos Conservancy in 91 and did this work for 30 years and retired in 2001, and here I am up in this beautiful part of the world. So the other thing that in addition to having the privilege, and it is a privilege, working with the Galapagos National Park and working in Galapagos, I think 2 of my finest accomplishments, one was that I was made a park warden, which was very exciting, and I had a sea sponge named after me. So who can say that? I don't think a lot of people can. And it wasn't like, this is Johannah the sea sponge, okay? This is, it actually, the Latin name is my name. So I thought that was pretty exciting. And I have that little poster in my office, and I'm very proud of that. So that's it. I mean, that's basically all I have to say about Galapagos, unless you've got questions.
So let me just grab a microphone for questions.
Oh, can I put?
I just need the microphone to turn on. Any questions here in? Oh,
How did the turtles get to the Galapagos Islands?
I swear I did not plant that question. That is such a good question. I will tell you how they got there. The theory is that they were on the continent, okay? And large pieces of vegetation came off these various jungle areas, and tortoises, they can't swim, but they can float. And they just floated over. Yeah, sort of like that. That's how they did it, just like that.
So they floated 600 miles?
They floated 600 miles, and then
Eating their boat on their way?
eating their boat on the way. Then the follow-up question, which I'm sure this young man is going to ask, is how did they get all around all these different islands? And that was the work of whalers and pirates. Because you can pick a tortoise up. I can't, but people can. Pick a tortoise up, put him in the hold of your boat, turn him or her upside down, and they can live without food or water for a year. So this was easy peasy. You know, you've got food, and actually tortoise bladders, I don't know why I pointed here, but, well, yes, I do, actually. Tortoise bladders can hold quarts of water. So you've got water, and you've got food. Kind of awful when you think about it. But that's how they got there, yeah.
Does anyone know why George was the only tortoise on that island? In other words, why weren't the other islands have multiple tortoises, right? So why was some of the islands tortoise-free, and why was George the only one on that island?
I can answer part A of that one, because the way where Pinta Island is located, it's the first island you hit if you happen to be sailing from, say, Massachusetts or England. And so it was easy to collect tortoises on that island, and in fact, the tortoises lived close to the coast, and a lot of them were female, so it's just easy to whoop them up, and that's how he ended up being the last guy. But if we went back, which I won't put anybody through, but if we went back to the slide that showed all the different islands, that's probably why George was by himself for such a long time.
Any other questions here? So, in the back.
I don't really know how to word this question, but so like the Galapagos is famous due to Charles Darwin, right? But it's also famous because the wildlife is extremely rare. You only find these animals on these islands. Is there similar parts of the world that have these isolated islands with very rare wildlife that don't get the Conservancy as the Galapagos due to the lack of popularity that Charles Darwin brings with the Galapagos?
Well, I can tell you that there are islands around the world that do have levels of endemism like Galapagos, like, for instance, the Seychelles. The Seychelles are the only other archipelago that have giant tortoises. I don't know if you knew that. And if you ever visit the National Zoo in D.C. and see the giant tortoise, you will say, ha ha, I know that that's an Aldabra tortoise, not a Galapagos tortoise, and then people around you will be very impressed that you happen to know that. And they'll say, wow, this is a guy worth listening to. But Madagascar, you know, you've got an amazing amount of endemism in Madagascar. Those are the two that come right off the top of my head. But, I don't know that Madagascar, other than David Attenborough, has a champion like you had with Charles Darwin. That's a good question. I'll think about that.
So I have a question. If I were to be interested in going to visit the Galapagos,
Yep.
is it best to, is there a particular...
Season?
Well, no, see, I mean, I was just saying, is there a particular, for lack of a better term, travel agent, or how best to experience it, do it yourself, or versus, going to like Viking cruise kind of thing?
Yeah. I would venture to say don't do it yourself. And don't do it yourself because even though it's cheaper, you're not going to see the full complement of islands. If you go on the Galapagos Conservancy website, there are a lot of travel companies we work with. That are still working with Galapagos. Yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, if you're a backpacker, you're in Quito, you're in Guayaquil, you've got a couple of days, sure, pop over and, spend, 1 or 2 days going to different islands. But really, it's just so much easier. It's better. You have a much fuller experience if you go with a travel agent.
And if I were to go, how much time should I allot to spend to sort of, rather than, is it a 2-day? Is it a 7-day?
I would say easy 10 days.
10 days.
I mean, I would say that because it takes, as I say, 2 days to get there, 2 days to come home, and then you've got 6-7 days in the middle where you can do an eastern route or a western route, and if you're going to go, for crying out loud,
right.
If you're going to spend the money, and I think I've said this before, they're not giving it away. It's expensive to go there. But, how often are you going to find yourself? Yeah, it's the Galapagos Islands. How often are you going to?
All right. Got another question here?
So earlier you mentioned that the population is growing.
Yes.
What makes all the uninhabitable islands uninhabitable?
Because they are national park. They're all national park. And even the inhabited islands, portions of them are national parks. You can't live there. You can't move there.
So of the 30,000 inhabitants, what percentage would you say are directly associated with the the upkeep of the island and the parks versus are there any industries or kind of thing?
Well, they're fishermen. I mean, fishing is a big industry, and not again. I come from outside of D.C. You would be surprised, but government is a big employer in Galapagos as well. So I would say government. I'd say fishing industry, but there's no building industry and tourism. So people associated with your trilingual bartender probably lives on the islands, but for the most part, it's just regular folk.
All right, another question.
Does Galapagos have like seasons, or what's like average temperatures? And
It does have seasons. Like December to May is probably the warmer season, and warmer being 80 degrees, 75, 80, something like that. And then from like June on, it's what they call the Garua season. It's colder. I say colder meaning 72 to 75. I mean, we're not talking Arctic. Although if you have a Galapagos come and visit you, I mean, they'd never come to Brackney, PA. I'll tell you that. I mean, they were just like, "What are you talking about? What is this nonsense?" Well, I know. I love Brackney. I mean, come on. But they're not going to do that. But it's also misty, and it's wetter, and the sea temperatures are colder. So what you get in the colder weather are things like more marine life. And so if you are particularly interested in seeing whales or dolphins or whatever you want to do, it's better then. Warmer weather, you get much more bird life. So watching albatrosses and stuff like that. That would be
I was just wondering what the settlements look like. Where do most people live? Like, do they have to import everything? And like, is there ever like conflict between like the wildlife and are people like going out and just doing
Sure.
stupid things?
There's,
And,
no, absolutely,
like, is
there's
that
conflict.
regulated? And
So the biggest group of folk live on the island of Santa Cruz, and there's probably, don't hold me to this, but probably, of the 30 plus, let's say 35,000, probably 20 live on Santa Cruz, and it's got traffic lights, it's got roads, it's got restaurants, discos, bars, that kind of stuff. When I first started this job, there were no traffic lights. The electricity went out at 10 o'clock and came back on at 6 in the morning. So, I mean, it was very different. Now you might as well be, I'm not going to say Manhattan, but, you're in a town that's got a lot of people. Then you have, say, San Cristobal, which is the provincial capital. There are probably a couple of thousand people living there. Again, roads, et cetera, et cetera. Floriana, which is has the smallest population, about 150 people live on Floriana. That's a little more rural that you'd probably have in your mind about what it might look like, but there are hotels there as well. And yeah, there are absolute conflicts because tortoises, for instance, have their own path. They go from point A to point B. If the wall of your garden happens to be between point A and point B, they are like little battering rams. They will just come right through and go, and they'll be right on the highway. And what are you going to do? Yeah. Well, it's a bad idea to run over a tortoise for a lot of reasons. It's like, hitting a deer. Well, yeah. I mean, it doesn't do well for your car, and it certainly doesn't do well for the tortoise. But that's about it. And then on the island of Isabela, I think they still hunt tortoises. They still kill them and eat them. Not supposed to. You're not allowed to, but, people do. Yes, sir.
On a broader basis of things, how is climate change, the rising of the waters, the warming of the waters, changes in climate affecting the islands?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, especially water, especially the water temperatures. So you have more frequent El Niños and La Niñas, and that impacts. You can get rid of an entire cohort, for instance, of marine iguanas when the waters warm up. So yeah, it absolutely has an impact, and it also has an impact on birds because of the absence of seeds, depending on what time of year it is. What you can do about it in Galapagos is the same question that we have about what we can do about it here, except be unhappy, yeah.
I haven't been to Galapagos, but I have been to the Seychelles.
Ah!
And
well, you got one on me. I'd love to go to the Seychelles.
Oh, you would.
I'd have a great time.
But there was the fruit bats that are out during the day, and you just have to duck.
They're big, aren't they?
Very big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Flying foxes. They're big. Yeah.
And but I also saw a tortoise. Tortoise can be a pet. The children actually ride them.
I know. I'm sure. I have pictures
they do.
I have pictures of scientists at the San Diego Zoo riding tortoises back in the 50s when people thought that was an okay thing to do.
Yeah. But anyways, it was. But would the fruit bat be what was the word?
Endemic.
Endemic.
It could be endemic to Seychelles. I think they have fruit bats in Madagascar too.
They would.
Yeah,
because there's a lot back and forth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh no, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Be exciting to see a fruit bat though. I think it'd be great. Yeah. I know, duck. Yeah, because they're. Fruit bat got your tongue?
Yeah, really. No, I was just doing, we were talking about seasons. The Galapagos Islands are just 1 degree below the equator.
That's correct.
So it also occurs to me it'd be probably a great place to put an observatory, because I'm sure there's...
Here it comes. Here it comes. We almost made it through the presentation. before we got the bite.
I'm contractually obligated.
Okay, yeah.
Unless there's any other questions. Oh, we do. Oh, great.
I have a question about how you approach like public involvement in Conservancy, especially for more things that are local to the people that are here. Like around here we have the ash-boring beetle and everything, and I don't believe that there's much that's successfully being done about it.
Unless you can find a predator, yeah.
But then also I have family that lives in the south of Florida, and they have pretty strong public involvement with the lionfish problem down there. If
You
you're
can eat them.
yeah, if you're capable of being in the water and if you spearfish and stuff, you're encouraged to just, if you see it, kill it. How do you recommend that the public best educate and involve themselves in like helping with instances of invasive species?
You mean here in this country, or do you mean in Galapagos?
Here, both.
Here.
If you have an answer.
Well, I think the first thing is identifying what's an invasive species. So, for instance, you see flag iris around here. The big, tall, yellow irises. They're horribly invasive, so don't plant them, things like lantana, flag iris. Well, there's a difference also between introduced and invasive. So, for instance, rhododendrons are introduced. Azaleas are introduced. Are they invasive? I don't know. In Scotland they are. In Ireland they are. Yeah, they'll take over enormous. So I think that's the first thing, is figure out what's, talk to your plant people and figure out what's invasive, don't plant it. And hopefully nurseries around here are going to say, no, we don't sell that. We don't sell Chinese, whatever. Oh, I'm getting feedback here.
They don't really do a great job with that. Like all the local, they don't do a great job.
They don't do a great job? Well, you make them do a great job, Mrs. Okay.
They're still selling calorie bear trees and
Oh, yeah,
still
this is-
selling all of these like really
'Cause they're pretty.
plants, and people just say, oh, they want a tree that grows in 3 years, that's beautiful.
And it's got lots of colors and stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
They're still selling it.
So I think that's it. I think it's just figuring out around here what's invasive, what's what you shouldn't do. Insects, wow. Invasive. I mean, insects really are. I mean, it's easy to shoot a goat, relatively speaking. I haven't, but it's probably pretty easy. But insects like the ash borer. I mean, unless you can figure out somebody who's going to eat them, you're done. Or sell all your ash trees. Get out before you've got nothing to sell. That's a good question. I don't know. And I forgot about marine life too. I don't know who's stocking ponds. But I bet you that there are things that escape your pond and get into the the creek and then into the Chesapeake, and there we are. Zebra mussels and yeah. Spiders? What are they? I mean, I know what a spider is, but I don't want to know about humongous spiders. I don't want to hear about that. Delete. Do they live here? They're working their way up the East Coast. Ladies and gentlemen, when you go out to your cars, be very careful. How big is it? The size of my hand? Oh, he's going to have a picture of it. So yeah, be very careful. Are there noises you can make that will make them go away? What is it about spiders that just... 3 inches. Oh, well, still, I wouldn't want one. Yeah, I still wouldn't want to hear about it. Yeah, well, then you have to find something that's going to eat those spiders. Like a tiger. Like a tiger, yeah. Maybe a tiger wouldn't want to eat the spiders, I don't know. Again, I'm an English major. What do I know?
I also had a question, if you have any sort of opinion on things that are popular publicly but are not necessarily conducive to conservation, like grass yards and outside cats.
Ooh, that was a loaded question. She already had the answer to it. Yeah, grass instead of, weed killers. Pesticides, grass rather than natural foliage. I know cats. Cats are a bad idea. I know, but I have to tell you that my cat goes outside. Yeah. What's another one that I was thinking about? Like this whole rewilding thing, that it's my personal opinion. Why are we bringing back a woolly mammoth? I mean, what is this mammoth going to do? Where is it going? Yeah, it's going to die. It's going to, unless you send it out in the tundra or send it to Canada. Canada's going to go, listen, we have enough trouble with you guys. You know, we don't need to hear about the woolly mammoth. But you know, what are you going to do? I mean, there are ideas about bringing back a dodo. What's it going to do? Where's it going to live? You know, these are things I think that sound good, and they might be kind of fun, but I don't understand why we'd want to do that, sir.
I was just curious about like your personal journey of how you got into this. Like, were you interested in the Galapagos at first, or you were into Conservancy and then just happened to land it there, or like if you could touch on your personal journey there?
Oh, my personal journey. Again, you guys, this is your chance to Galapagos to Brackney. Oh, that sounds like the beginning of a book, from Galapagos to Brackney. So I, as I said, you know, I had a great career choice in that I had an undergraduate and graduate degree in medieval English. I mean, if you want something to put on your resume, if you want to rocket to the top, you just get yourself a master's in medieval English. So with that in mind, you know what it does? It just teaches you to read and write. And that is the critical piece of my job, is that I can read and write. And I'm not even joking. That's really important to be able to do and to be able to communicate. So I ended up raising money. I raised money for a lot of organizations, the Wilderness Society, Rails to Trails, Audubon, as Director of Development. And I was actually at a conference in Australia. And I was at the top of the escalator, and at the bottom of the escalator was a fellow named Craig McFarland, who said, hey, Johannah, I understand you raise money. And I said, well, why, yes, I do. And he said, we want to have a capital campaign for the Galapagos Islands. Would you be interested? And I said, sure. Then I had to go look up where the Galapagos Islands were. I didn't know. And I did, and said, yeah, this would be great. And that's how it started. And I worked for the Charles Darwin Foundation for a while, and then I said, I can do this. And I think that's the other piece too, is the ability to say, you know, let's give it a go. Let's give it a whirl. Young people in the audience, let's give it a whirl, you know. Did I know what I was doing? Not really. But I think the other thing is, when you ask people for help, they'll give it to you. You know, they really will. If you say, I have no idea what I'm doing, this I think is going to make sense. What do you guys think? 9 times out of 10, you're gonna get good people who are going to help you. So thanks for that question. Sir?
So I just had a question about the population. So it went from 12,000 to 30,000.
Yep.
Is that from just families getting larger and not moving away, or is that people moving to the islands?
People moving to the islands.
And is the island starting to run out of space for people? Is it starting to encroach on the national forest part?
That part is not happening, but a lot of the reason people moved to the islands back in the 60s, 70s, 80s is because of natural disasters on the mainland. Volcanic explosion, floods, etc. And so Galapagos is easy. It's easy to live there. It's warm. It's like being, you know, would you rather be homeless in Miami or homeless in Homer, you know, Alaska? I'd rather be homeless in Miami because it's warmer there. And a lot of people moved there because it was just an easier place to live. Now, these same groups of people, once, and this is true in Galapagos, if you have money, when your kids hit 12, you move back to the mainland because the education is better in the mainland and the healthcare is better in the mainland. So that kind of keeps the equilibrium a little bit. But yeah, you cannot live on parkland, so there is and they're being very, very strict about who moves. So, like, if you were thinking of moving to Galapagos, nah, okay. Yeah. Not gonna work.
All right. Well, unless there's any other questions, I mean, or if something pops up, feel free to
watch out for those spiders.
Yeah.
Parking lot. I'm just saying.
So there appears to be some clearing. So I'm going to invite you, if you haven't already, come out. Let's see what we might be able to see through our scopes. Also at around 9:40, there's a pass of the International Space Station. And so if you're available to stick around for that, we'll point that out to you as well. And Johanna, thank you so much again for an outstanding. And also thanks for those watching on the live stream. We had at least one person from Boston, but we had a number of people saying, "Oh, I just found your channel." So thank you for introducing Kopernik to some other people as well. So, all right. Well, thanks again. Next week we have a presentation on citizen science. In particular, if you remember last year that solar eclipse that happened, well, there's actually some scientists down actually at the University of Scranton that put together a citizen science project, actually that ham radio operators participated. In the evenings where you can start to hear AM radios stations far away. So they were doing experimentations on what happens with radio propagation during an eclipse. And so Dr. Nathaniel Frizzell will come up from the University of Scranton and talk about the citizen science effort to understand more about what happens during eclipses, how does it affect radio propagation, and Nathaniel's an outstanding speaker, so I think it's worth checking out as well. So look forward to having you come back, and thanks again for coming up tonight.